Hi, this is Phil Leach, and welcome to the continuation of part 7 of Discovering the Psalms. We've already looked at Psalms of Lament, and what I want to do in this session is to explore the particular category of Psalms of Lament known technically as imprecatory Psalms. Now, this is speaking about what we could also call cursing psalms. That is, where the psalmist is praying judgment and destruction down upon their enemies. This, of course, gives some people a real struggle, because doesn't Jesus say we should love our enemies and do good to those that do evil to us? And if this is the case, then how come godly people are writing psalms such as these and praying prayers such as these, where they're praying destruction and devastation on their enemies? Now, there's a number of examples of imprecatory psalms. You'll find some in your Psalms leaflet, and there's a few more examples here on the screen which you can explore. But what I want to do is just look at a couple as examples and just talk about this whole dimension of the Psalms. So let's take Psalm 58 for example. It's a good example because it's a psalm about the wicked who are being cruel and perpetrating massive injustice. In fact, the psalm is set up a little bit like a law court. And again, you can stop the video and read this psalm. But we're breaking in verse 3. The wicked go astray from the womb. They err from their birth, speaking lies. They have venom like the venom of a serpent, like the deaf adder that stops its ears, so that it does not hear the voice of the charmers or the cunning enchanter. And then we get the imprecatory part of the psalm. O God, break the teeth in their mouths. Tear out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord. So very powerful imagery here. Let them vanish like water that runs away. Like grass, let them be trodden down and wither. Let them be like a snail that dissolves into slime, like the untimely birth that never sees the sun. Really powerful imagery. Do to them as you did to Midian, as to Sisera and Jabin at the river Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor, who became dung for the ground. Make them their nobles like Orb and Zeb, all their princes like Zeba and Salmanunna, who said, let us take possession for ourselves of the pastures of God. O my God, make them like whirling dust, like chaff before the wind. As fire consumes a forest, let the flames, as the flame sets the mountains ablaze, so may you pursue them from your tempest and terrify them with your hurricane. Again, notice the really powerful imagery, metaphors and similes in this particular psalm. And just as a note, when he speaks about do to them as you did to Midian, Sisera and Jabin were the king and army captain of Midian that Deborah defeated in Judges 4. And Orb and Zeb and Zeba and Zalmunna were defeated by Gideon in Judges 7 and 8. And so praying for the defeat of the wicked here. Another imprecatory psalm, and perhaps the most well-known, is Psalm 137, verses 7 to 9. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites the day of Jerusalem, how they say, lay it bare, down to its foundations. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to be destroyed, blessed shall he be who repays you for what you have done to us. Blessed shall be the one who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rock. And I think this is the verse, particularly verse 9, that so many people find offensive and ask, how could that be a genuine prayer of someone and recorded in the Psalms? Okay, firstly, let's have some consideration for such psalms. We need to remember that these psalms are a response of people in very, very difficult and very dangerous situations. This is why understanding the background to a psalm can be important. The psalms are occasional. They're not just abstract. Someone didn't just sit down at a point in time and write a psalm that is cursing people. But rather, these prayers were prayed out of people experience incredible injustice. Terrible oppression. And people at times being in incredible danger for their lives and having experienced loss. David, for example, on the run from King Saul, who was absolutely committed to killing him. And so we need to realize these psalms are occasional and are coming out of incredible pain and heartache that people are experiencing. Let's have an example. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites the day of Jerusalem, how they said, lay it bare, down to its foundations. And so a prayer here against the Edomites for the way they were really, what we know from history, siding with the Babylonians when the Babylonians were destroying Judah. And the Edomites were against the Jewish people. And then this prayer against Babylon. Blessed shall be the one who repays you for what you've done to us. And we can see actually in quite detail from Kings, Chronicles, but also Lamentations. Lamentations, this 5 poems of lament, were written after the destruction of Jerusalem, and as you read them you can see through the poetry and the images the terrible, horrendous things that were happening when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem. The events are times of, really for many of us today, unimaginable violence. The cruelty of the victorious army all the way down through history really has been the same. It has been really, really awful. We today, in many nations of the world, we have the Geneva Convention that was written by Christians to make a separation between combatants, soldiers and civilians, and trying to say how civilians should be protected. But of course none of this was around for most of history. And if you were defeated, the army that would come in would so often commit atrocities beyond what we could imagine for many of us, and we need to realize this was just normal in ancient warfare. And so this response, this psalm, is a prayer out of the bitterness of soul, the brokenness of the awful things that people had experienced. The nation had been completely destroyed. Thousands had been slaughtered, and not just killed in battle, but cruelly executed. As I've mentioned, the nation of Edom had been involved in the ransacking, the looting, and perpetuating the violence on the defeated people of Judea or Judah. Most of those who had not been killed had been marched into captivity. And it would seem this is where Psalm 137 was actually written, from a place of captivity in Babylon. Now, what we need to realize is that even as these Psalms were written out of the bitterness of people's experience or danger they're facing, what's actually happening is the people are calling for penalties, judicial penalties, in other words, judgments, to be applied to the guilty. In other words, they're praying for justice to be done. They're asking for punishments that correspond to the crime. We could say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In other words, justice that is equal to the atrocities or the bad things that have happened. And of course, this is how punishment worked in the ancient world. And what it is God, or these people are asking God often to fulfill prophetic oracles already issued. If you have a moment, read Obadiah. It's the shortest book in the Old Testament, but it's a prophetic utterance regarding Edom. And in Obadiah you see the atrocities of Edom listed, but also the judgments that this nation would receive, especially because of the historic relationship Edom had with Israel. And going way back, Israel Jacob and Esau were brothers, and it's where these nations came from. Likewise, when it comes to Psalm 137 and the references to Babylon, we see Babylon being spoken against by the prophet Isaiah, and judgments being issued on Babylon. Let's look particularly at verse 16. Verse 15 reads, "Whoever is guilty will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword." And talking of Babylon, their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes, their houses will be plundered, and their wives ravished. Again, let me say, this is the kind of normal practice for so much of history when an invading army is victorious on a defeated people. And so there's a prayer that the judgment on Babylon would indeed happen. So the question is about these Psalms and about us. How do we respond to injustice? Probably few of us have experienced anything like the injustice experienced by the authors of these Psalms. Some may have, and I want to acknowledge that. But how do we respond to injustice? Well, one option is seeking personal revenge, of course, and growing in bitterness as we think of that, or trying to suppress or deny the feelings that we have of injustice, hurt, or anger. Surely the best way is recognizing the awfulness of things that happen to people, happen to us. We take those feelings to God and we pour out our hearts to God, expressing what we feel with honesty and integrity. We express that pain and that anger, the injustice, the loss, and the desire for retribution. And we express it to God. In other words, we're pouring out that sense of injustice and that desire for retribution, that desire for justice, this desire that all of us have for justice to be served. What we do is we pour that out to God in prayer. Surely that is what these psalmists are doing, and surely this is the best way to handle awful situations without trying to deny them and pretend that they never happened, or to let them consume us so we end up taking issues into our own hands. In other words, these psalms teach us to let God be the judge. And through such prayer, we're releasing judgment to him. Our situation may not be as extreme as some of these psalms, but nonetheless, when we have been sinned against and there's an injustice, we feel it very intensely. Surely the best way is to be in prayer, pouring our hearts out to God and trusting him to be the one who takes care of such things. Romans 12:9, Beloved, never avenge yourself, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. God is the judge, and he is the one who ultimately will take care of these things. And he knows everything and is aware of everything. And these psalms are a way, actually a means of faith, saying, God, I trust you with this situation. You are the judge. You take care of it. And at the same time brings a sense of release and relief in being able to let these things go, putting them in the hands of God.